Thank you very much. So here's an interesting question that I need your help with. Who shapes today's research experiences? Is it software developers or is it researchers? And I say I need your help with the questions because this is going to be an interactive session. I'm going to talk for about 10 minutes to set the scene, and then I'm going to pose some questions that I'd like your help in working out the answers. And we'll do that probably in tables, and we'll give those questions at the end. You can discuss them as a group, and then we'll come back and get some answers from it. So why do I think this question is important? Well, just look at today's conference sessions, yesterday's conference sessions. Look at all the conference sessions you go to. If you weren't here yesterday, read my colleague Chris Martin. He's written a summary of yesterday's conference, and his theme is about technology, effectively, and how much of yesterday's session is about technology. So I think it's important because everywhere we go, we have technology that is at our fingertips as consumers, but also as research. We have so many new methods. So in a way, it is kind of dictating some of our research choices. So I think that's why it's important to pose that question. Why do I care about this question? Well, there's an interesting point as well. So my background, I'm actually a researcher by heart. I'll hold my hand up to that. So for 20 years before we changed our name and rebranded to Flexamar, we were a traditional full-service research agency. I've flown around the world doing focus groups. I've done surveys. So I'm a researcher at heart. And we started building a platform to help answer our own questions, very much like Australia's need in terms of agility. We wanted to bring that agility to our research. So we started building the platform. And then about maybe 5-6 years ago, we rebranded to Flexamar because the world had changed. And we made our platform available in a SaaS model. So you can now use that in a SaaS model, as well as using us as researchers. And at that point, I had to make a decision as CEO. I had to swap our development method. We had to build a development team in-house. I thought, that's easy enough. I've built research teams before. We'll just build a development team. Easy peasy. Word for the wise, it's not that easy. Developers work very differently to researchers. I've quickly found that. Today, as a business, we have a team of 10 developers, software developers in-house. We had to recruit a CTO. We had to build software developers, learn languages, effectively. I don't know them. And we have 20 researchers. And they're very different. I mean, they mix socially. Don't get me wrong. They work very well socially. But actually, when it comes to watching their modes of work, they are very, very different. Researchers don't really understand how software developers work. I think it's fair to say. Look at others we might know. So there is a bit of difference in there. So that's why it's an important question, because I see it every day. This is my life now. It's not just running focus groups. I have to deal with the questions this poses. So I think it is an important question for us to pose, and it's an important question that actually we all come in touch with in some ways because of all of our research that does use technology in that. So I'll talk a bit about the background as to why I think this is important a bit more and share with you some figures about technology and about research and how research is using technology as an industry. And then I'll just share a bit of our own experiences about, as I say, the differences between researchers and developers. And I'll share a bit about the constraints and the dependencies between the two. And by sharing that, hopefully not too much of our innards as an organization, you'll get to see that in action. And hopefully then it'll help us when I've got 4 questions at the end to help them think about what that means for us as an industry, not just as individuals, as companies. So this first slide, lots of data on it. It's from the GRIT report. So the interesting point on there as you look down the list from 1 to 12 is only 2 of those top 12 emerging research. So this is emerging research methods. Only 2 of them don't really require software developers to build or implement. Online communities, mobile-first surveys, webcam-based interviews, social media analytics, text analytics, big data analytics, mobile quality. We talked about a lot of these already in this conference. There's only really 2, and I'm not even sure microsurveys isn't software. So all of those emerging trends that we see in the GRIT report only 2 don't actually touch software developers. The rest do touch software developers. Software developers are integral to those trends and those emerging themes. Influence and reach. Online surveys are 2.3 times more likely to be used by market researchers than leading non-online options. And while in the qual sector, while in-person focus group will remain the most popular, online communities now hold the number 4 spot, used by 25% of researchers. So they have an impact on our everyday choices of research and on our future choices of what we think are going to influence our research going forward. And another one from the GRIT report, a bit harder to read this slide, but more than 80% of researchers believe that big data, storytelling, visualization will be a game changer or interesting to our industry as a trend. And more than 70% of researchers believe AI or automation to be a game changer as well. So not only is our current choices and our emerging trends about technology, what we think is going to influence our industry going forward is heavily technology when you get into AI, and don't even get me started on algorithms and what that means to organizations like myself and software developers and skills. So what exactly do software developers influence? Because you might be thinking, well, how do they influence it? I just see the end product. So software category, data collection tools, analysis and reporting, project management, those are the kinds of things that we do from a project management, but they all require technology. There are software elements, the UI, the usability of something, that influences how we use something. The human interface that you use comes from a software developer at some point. There's features that are added to a product. They're kind of restricted and constrained by what's possible in the technology and also in what's priority, in whether it's faster or takes longer to develop. Software channels, online interfaces, desktop, talk about mobile, talk about desktop. Again, screen sizes, platform. I'd love to have voice-based surveys. But again, that's influence constrained at the moment by the number of platforms that are available, be it Alexa or be it another one, Cortana. They're all different platforms I have to understand before I can do that. So I can't actually do that because it's too technically complex to get into that. In fact, if you're using any element of internet or download software at any point in your research experience is being shaped in some way by a software developer somewhere else, earlier in that chain. So here's a quote from one of our software developers. Software development marketing research is ultimately about providing people with a voice. We harness technology to create in digital spaces that empowers researchers and encourages people to share their thoughts. That's a very grand statement. That guy is at the moment working on a new survey scripting interface for our platform, and I'll share a bit about that in the future. So he is actually shaping very now my future as a company, because that software interface is in his hands as we speak. Alex is also working on another product which is more about analysis. And he says it shouldn't surprise anyone that the software development landscape evolves at a very rapid pace. It's one of the most difficult elements about it. It's changing so fast. And it's his job to understand these technologies and how they can complement. So he sits there with our researchers, understands what they're trying to analyze, and then has to go away and find a solution to that. And that's what he's trying to do, again, as we speak in terms of how analysis actually happens. So what's the impact? What's the bit of the constraint here? So let me share a bit, again, about what we're doing and some of the challenges I face as an individual in our business. So I think this helps the question. So the first one there is the methodology of the projects that you use are restricted by technology. You may not think they are at the end user, but let me share probably overshare here. Chris will probably kill me for sharing this. So we primarily were a qual platform. We evolved as a qual platform. And then about 5-6 years ago, our clients were wanting direct access to surveys, so we added a survey tool into that platform. It's used today by a lot of our clients. And my own research team sat there saying, I want to be able to do this, I want to be able to do that, I want to be able to do these things. And my development team were like, if you're going to do those things, if you want to change to do that, you're going to need to change that technology. The technology that that's built on needs to change. The new technology, there's this thing here that we can use that will make this much better. So suddenly they're making a decision that actually what the constraint of a researcher, the researcher is constrained by what the developer produced 5 years ago, and the development team are then saying, we need to change the technology to move that forward. So researchers were constrained by that. And in the scripting interface, they're constrained by however that UI has been done. Okay, so we flip that over. I make the bold decision. All right, Dave, in this particular case, go away and look at the new technology you've suggested. Go away and do something. And I make the bold decision, just give him free rein. I thought that's a good idea. He knows the technology. We give him free rein. We give him a blank piece of paper. So he comes back about 6 months later and goes, look at this. It's fantastic. This scripting interface, it will empower your researchers like never before. And he's right. I got really excited. And then I sat there with my own researcher head on and thought about my scripting experiences. And those are dependent on my expectations. And I've used online survey platforms for about 10 years before he came and invented his. And suddenly I'm sitting there, and he doesn't know, but I've got expectations of how a survey scripting interface should work, and he's changed it. So I'm sitting there thinking, if I'm going to give this to my clients, they're going to expect this, and it does that. So how do we overcome that? So now we're in a frame where I think, okay, this is a new product. I need to be in that. So now every month I sit down with him and the product owner to try and work through those in an agile way. So we sit there and go, well, you need to change that, you need to change it. We've got a front-end developer involved, and he's great because he can make things happen in the browser, make it look better, make it look more modern, give us more choices. But we're working on the way the interface works to make it bridge the revolutionary new style with the expectations that you probably will have. So again, there's expectations and constraints that exist in a very real manner. And my decision was I had to get involved as a researcher, not as CEO, to try and bridge that gap. I can't let everyone in the company design it, otherwise it'll never be finished. The other thing we did was the product owner. Every technology team should have a product owner to bridge the gap between the developers and the product creation process. Our product owner spent 5 or 6 years doing, she's a researcher. She was part of our full service setup. She just enjoys technology. So she's the product. She spends her daily life now is not doing research. Her daily life is watching what the developers are doing and translating our clients' requests into specifications. And that was done to try and bridge that gap between software and developer, which is a hard gap to fill. And that's because of this kind of pyramid. At the end of the day, I'm sat there at the top making decisions. Your businesses have CEOs and boards that make decisions. At the bottom, we have software developers. We have what's called back-end software developers. And we have infrastructure software developers who do all weird and wonderful things that no one understands. Then we have the cool front-end development guys. They're a bit cooler. They're all about design. And they've got some really funky stuff. And then we as researchers sit in the middle somewhere, be it about agile product development or be it in my business developing software, who sit between that two. But that pyramid needs to change a bit. So this is how it traditionally might look. So the developer input goes some way and the researcher input goes a bit further. But it probably needs to go a bit more like that. And that's what we did. Go back to my comment about the product owner. What we're effectively trying to do is make the product owner who's got research experience back into the development experience. And then the developers, I'm trying to put them in front of researchers, like in our product development process, to try and get that scripting interface to work. So here are 4 questions that I want you to think about as an industry, as individuals. Does it matter? What makes a good experience for participants and projects for stakeholders? I'm going to summarize these in a minute, so you don't have to write them down. Second question, what should we be teaching developers who work in the research industry? So our software developers, they worked in software, but they're acutely aware they're in the research industry. So is the things that we should be doing with software developers in our industry to help them understand what our expectations are, or more about what we need? And another aside, real-world example here is text analytics is a big thing. Should the text analytics process and interfaces be designed by developers who understand the algorithms, or should they be designed by us who know what we want as analysts or qual researchers? And how can we improve communication between researchers and developers? How do we get that flow of communication about who can do things and what can we do and how we do it? That's a very real-world example for me. And how can developers and researchers work together to find the best outcomes for us as an industry in there? So here comes the challenge bit. I want you to try and turn to the people next to you and raise some of these questions. If you don't care, just try. And then afterwards, in about 5 minutes, we'll get a bit of feedback from each table.
So choose a question and get stuck in. We'll hear the noise. Where the cube is. You're making them work.
They didn't expect that, did they? They literally hoped I was just going to keep talking. I suspect some are going, does it care? Does it care?
How are you guys? How are you guys?
Do you think it matters?
Are you enjoying the conference?
Do you think it matters, or do you think these questions matter, or
Were you here yesterday?
Yeah.
Is this on?
what do you do? Which business
I hear
do you
myself.
researchers?
It's maybe. So, anyway, thank you guys for
I
attending.
need a drink. I've seen the picture. You've seen my pain.
Actually, I was in an R&D project after 2013, and we tried to develop a mobile research software, an application. It was a complete failure because they couldn't understand at all what is research. They talk about forms instead of surveys, and
that's right.
I was
Yes.
messed up.
Yeah.
And they decided things that they shouldn't have decided, and they didn't ask things that they had to ask.
Yes.
And they said that after a while it wasn't in the specification, but it was
That's right.
clearly there.
Yeah. I get that every time. Yeah, I get that all the time. It wasn't in the specification. Like, so that was one thing we did at in the community platform. There's a newsletter functionality. So it's great now, but the user said it doesn't work, and they're like, it does work, it doesn't work, it does work. And there's this argument. And they said, well, we're copying and pasting the text out of the Word. And they're, it wasn't. You didn't tell us you wanted to copy it out of Word. Like, what else are they going to do? We have to sign it off with the client in Word, and then we're going to copy the text. We're not going to rewrite the text. I wasn't built to do that. You didn't tell us you wanted to copy it from Word. It wasn't in the specification. I was like, just did it. Yeah, it's.
I know, and we had the same. I mean, just received yesterday a specification from the
We ready?
Yeah. Do you want to?
Are you gonna?
Yeah, you
want people to use
just
this?
throw it.
Okay.
Well, I don't know. I don't know how to do it. Whether to do it table by table or.
You want to do table by
I
table
don't
because we
know.
only have about
I
5
know you
minutes.
have about 5 minutes.
So, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Now you've got started. I can't stop you now.
Okay, everyone.
So, have we got any feedback?
So, what did you guys come up with?
Does anybody want to give us some feedback from the first question? What makes a good experience? Should we just throw the mic out and see what happens? Come on, there's a lot of
Do you
discussion.
guys want to share with us your answer to the first question?
Answer any of the questions if you want to.
So I've been sitting here feeling like this talk has been directly at me because I'm a software developer working in a market research agency.
Sorry.
No, it's good because it has been meshing with a lot of the struggles that we've been having trying to establish a software development team within a market research agency. And I feel like we're getting there, but we have, through bitter experience, learned some of the things that you've been talking about in this talk. And if I could have seen you tell it to me 3 years ago, we might have been able to cut that process short a little bit. So I think in terms of the making a good experience, it actually comes back to some of what we were hearing in the last talk, that if you can iterate, you can actually get the shared understanding, because people can see a product and use it in practice and then feedback, and then you can start again. Whereas when we've got most of the way there and then suddenly found that we're working on the wrong model because we hadn't understood what we were being asked, that causes no end of trouble. So yeah, in terms of what, as developers, we've needed to learn, we've needed to actually get a reasonably deep understanding of research as a process, research as an industry, because otherwise we will hear things from researchers and we'll think that we're understanding what they're telling us, but we're not, we're misinterpreting it. And they don't have the words to describe it to us because they're not developers. And we absolutely need to meet in the middle, because I'm never going to be a market researcher, and most of the researchers I work with are never going to be developers. But if we can't meet in the middle, we can't work together effectively.
Yeah, it's a very good points. And somebody else, another table, perhaps. God, there was more discussion than that. Anybody want to share experiences or thoughts or challenges back? Put your hand up again. Sorry, thank you.
Hi, I'm Chandrani. I have actually been a researcher for 20 years, and my last stint I was in a product company where I was the researcher and I had to work with the product development team. So I've gone through the struggles of trying to make them understand what I want to build. And now in my new role, I'm actually developing products where I'm working with technology team and research team, understanding clients' needs and doing this. So because I have gone through that entire journey of fighting with the development team and trying to make them understand my point of view, I think I'm better placed where I understand what their problems are, as well as how I need to bridge the gap and help them understand the research point of view. So I think it's the way to work is highly collaborative. There is, finally, it is the client that matters because they are the customer. So it's important at every stage of the process to be involved. And like you said, there has to be a project lead because that's the only way that the two teams will work together. And like Estrel was saying, that it is an MVP process that you continuously develop, iterate, and go back to each other and keep doing that process so that you are able to give that end result as the client would expect.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you.
Time for
Excellent.
one more?
Time for one more.
Yeah.
Hi, Sandra from GDE. We were discussing it, and actually the answer to the third question is actually in the second one. I think I've heard a couple of people saying what we need and we should be teaching, and I think that implies an unequal relationship between development and researchers. I think you need to learn from each other. It's a two-way communication. It's not necessarily a one-way, I need this solution. Coming back to your presentation, actually defining your need instead of saying, I want this solution, because development has a big toolbox of any solution that it can provide you with as long as you define your problem. how do you say that, in detail to them.
Yeah. It's a quick one at the front. Sorry.
Okay. To me, as a researcher, I often feel that the communication between researchers and developers is like communication between men and women. You know? And it's like, I'm a researcher and a woman, so it's like researchers should teach or help developers be more open to empathy, and vice versa would be to be much more open to tactical, how we do this, how we get to that. Okay, I understand that we need to understand people and connect with people and so on. That's the vision.
Yeah.
But researchers, I think that researchers should learn a little bit of discipline and patience in making clear steps towards that vision, because the researchers are usually very impatient about
They are.
the
I think it's a
direction.
brilliant, I hate to fulfill stereotypes, but our 10 developers are all male, and almost 80% of my 20 researchers are female. So it actually is male-female.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Yeah.
Everyone.